Hey guys, and welcome back to ScarletSprites. This is kind of a first here. I'm going to talk about something that I've already done a video on. We're going to revisit the Darksoft CPS1 Multi. It's still relevant and the best way to play CPS1 games in my opinion. It's still available to purchase from the usual places and yeah, it's still expensive. It's no secret that the Darksoft CPS2 Multi is one of my favorite pieces of hardware. I used to say it was the best bang for the buck as far as arcade gaming went, particularly if you're a fan of 90s arcade gaming. Capcom was just on in this era, and having one device that played all of those CPS2 games accurately is just bliss. Obviously, you have your Street Fighters and Darkstalkers, but also shooters like Mars Matrix, and then beat-em-ups like Alien vs. Predator, Dungeons & Dragons, Armored Warriors. I mean, I could just gush and keep going, but this isn't a revisit the CPS2 video. And then we get into the CPS3, and I was fortunate enough to buy this more than 10 years ago when it was still kind of sort of cheap. And of course, I have the Darksoft solution deployed for this as well, albeit not the cream of the crop Sims, but rather just the Super BIOS. It still lets me play all 6 games, but with some extended write times, obviously. You can see I've been practicing my 3D printing here too, with the cart shell and a case for the SCSI to SD. It's not very sexy, it's just a box, but it does keep the board from flopping around loose and banging into things. Alright, so you can kind of see where I'm going here. It bothered me a bit that I had these 2 great Darksoft solutions rolled out for CPS2 and CPS3, but CPS1 I kind of passed on, and look, it's expensive. That is 80% of the reason I passed on it the first time around, but it always bothered me a bit that I just never completed the Capcom trilogy. I had also convinced myself that I had owned the games that I wanted to for CPS1, and that's largely true. One of the first boards I bought way back was a Final Fight. I had that on Super Nintendo when I was a kid, but when I got into arcade gaming and collecting, I was just thrilled at the idea that I didn't have to settle for a port anymore and that I could own the actual arcade version of this game. Now, ports aren't necessarily bad. In some cases, they're actually better, but it kind of speaks to where your mind is at times and the differences in what is important to you at different stages of a hobby, but also life. Champion Edition was another game I got early on. And speaking of growth and mindsets, I still haven't matured on this one. Champion Edition is still my favorite version of Street Fighter 2. I am self-aware to know that I am blinded by nostalgia on that opinion, but everything after Champion Edition just felt like too much to me. Back to the CPS1, the other game I had on Super Nintendo that I loved and wanted was UN Squadron, also known as Area 88. I had a conversion PCB of this that played perfectly well. I've since sold that since picking up Multi, but that was another game that I just felt like I had to own. And while we were on Area 88, check out this huge theatrical sized original Capcom poster I got a few months ago for the game. I love that the Capcom logo on this is still the old white lettering. I have to get this up on my wall eventually. Finally, Punisher. Some of you guys probably recall me picking this up 2 or 3 years ago at a local auction. It had suicided and was an easy fix to simply recap and drop in essentially what is the Affinity for CPS 1.5 hardware. But yes, it's back and fully working. So I convinced myself I was good on CPS1 stuff. Anything that wasn't one of those games, which is still quite a few titles, I would just play on Mister. Then I picked up a bunch of parts and boards in an auction and found myself cobbling together a Ghouls Ghosts conversion, which I did actually get working 100% and it plays great, but it reminded me that not only were there more games in this library that I enjoy, but that I was willing to go through the effort and these lengths to make a conversion of something because playing it on original hardware was worth it to me. So this is when I started reconsidering picking up the Darksoft CPS1 Multi. I like playing on and using original boards and hardware that's in my collection. I don't talk about consoles often on here, but I do the same thing where those are concerned as well. It's just a personal preference, and I'm thankful to still have a large portion of what I have collected over the past few years. And look, I know it's not 100% original hardware. It wouldn't be a multi-unit if it were. But the key components that are running and processing the game are generally original. It's a delivery system, if you will. It's very much like how a flash cart for a console delivers a ROM. And that tidbit is a good segue here to what is newish on the Darksoft CPS1 Multi, the Lucent sound chip. Previously, the Darksoft CPS1 units had harvested sound chips or ran an FPGA solution to process the Q sound. Now a version exists that doesn't need a Q sound chip from a broken board and doesn't need an FPGA. Through some crafty engineering, Darksoft was able to program these DSP16A chips to perform as Q sound chips. As he noted upon the release of this version, Q sound chips are just basically the same DSP16A chips that are running special code. So I thought this was a really nice variant addition, and I've been having a bit of a CPS1 crush this summer. I've long had a desire to complete the Capcom CPS trilogy, and so I caved and bought the Multi. Now, if you guys remember, I had an issue the first time around with getting the Multi to work with my Champion Edition A board. I stole the A board that I had used for the Ghouls Ghosts conversion that I just talked about. I went to work on assembling this, and I had no issues at all this time around. I was curious about trying this version of the Multi on my Champion Edition board, but honestly, not that curious, and I didn't feel like taking it out of the plexi casing that it's currently in. And speaking of plexi cases, that is almost a must-have for the Darksoft CPS1. Lions 3 makes a beefy case that you can use to tidy all of this up once you have everything put together. I really don't like handling my boards all that much, especially ones like this that are, well, 1, expensive, and 2, frequently in use and more likely to get dinged while out in the open or being handled. The other really nice thing about this Lions 3 case is that it incorporates the LCD selector right into the top of the case. Otherwise, the unit would just be loose and out in the open, and this kind of solidifies everything into one nice clean package. There's even a mount for a fan, so if you're concerned about heat building up inside the case, you can set up an exhaust, which of course I did. Volume knobs are easily accessible as well for both JAMA as well as the 1.5 games. Overall, this is a really solid case. I personally think it's a must if you're not planning on mounting your setup inside of a cabinet. The case also supports some additional add-ons which have been released since the Multi has been out. The first one is the dip switch extender, which does exactly what you would assume it does. There are a few different options for this, but the one that I use solders onto the bottom of the A board, and then you can run an extension to the side panel here. This would be a huge pain in the ass to change the dips if you had your board cased up and had to take it apart to do so. Now, this solution puts everything right here on the side so you don't have to worry about that. It's relatively cheap too, if I recall, and I'll put a link to a lot of this stuff down in the description. The other nice add-on is this kick extension and 3 and 4 player support that's added to this small PCB that can attach to the front of the case. Much like the dip switches, not having easy access to the kick harness connection on the board would be a pain if the board was all cased up. Now this solves that problem and adds additional help by giving you the DB15 ports for the 3rd and 4th player controls for games like Slam Masters. So even if you have this hooked up to an arcade cabinet, you could just plug in some Neo Geo controllers and have 4 people playing at once, which is really awesome. Another really cool add-on for this is the Forgotten World spinner. It does exactly what it sounds like it does, and it gives you the option to use a spinner for Forgotten Worlds, so you can play it the way it was originally meant to be played. Now there is a hacked version that allows you to use a standard controller, but the spinner is definitely the way to go. I mean, if you've never had the opportunity to play with a spinner in an arcade or on a custom setup, you definitely owe it to yourself to do so. There just isn't really anything like it to compare it to. It's a fun control mechanism that you just don't see anymore. Now this add-on is only $55. I skipped it for the time being. I'll probably go back and add it on later to complete the package here. But after the cost of the Multi itself and the other add-ons, enough was enough for the time being, and I just had to stop the bleeding a little bit. Since I know people will ask, what games have I been spending the most time with now that I have this? And I'd have to say, oddly, it's Carrier Airwing, simply because I never really played it all that much before, and it's the spiritual sequel to UN Squadron, and since I'd been on a UN Squadron kick, this was an easy transition. If I'm honest, I don't think it's as good as UN Squadron, but that could just be me looking at UN Squadron through rose-colored glasses and not having any real history with Carrier. Slam Masters is the other game that I fire up a lot, and I can't get enough of Hager's entrance song. I did not have an original PCB for this, and so now being able to play it on this setup has been pretty fun. I've yet to get a 4-player match going on a cabinet, but that's on my to-do list for later this year. I don't think it's on anyone else's list who might be coming or visiting over, so it might be a hard sell, but I definitely want to do it. It's kind of like when I had the 4-player setup for League Bowling going on the 2 cabinets. No one cared other than me, and that's why I have you guys that appreciate this kind of stuff. You guys care. Some of you. So that's the state of things for the CPS1 Multi here in 2025. As far as gameplay goes, loading, all that stuff, everything is still the same as you remember it being from a few years ago. It really is an awesome reference level kit. It's pricey, but it's worth it for the right person, I suppose. It took me a while to come around, but I'm really glad that I have this, and selling off the UN Squadron conversion I had and some of the other console carts helped lessen the blow of this purchase. Thanks so much for stopping by and checking out the Darksoft CPS1 Multi with me again today. Links to a lot of things I mentioned should be in the description down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you all next time, whenever that may be.